Hey everybody, welcome back to Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at student success,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically some of the big names you always hear about these days.
Yeah.
Things like SEL and PBIS.
Right, right.
We're going deep on this article by Dr. Howie Knoff,
Okay.
and he's got some pretty strong opinions on whether these programs are actually doing what they promise.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
So whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just someone who likes to keep up with education trends, this deep dive is going to give you a lot to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody wants kids to be, emotionally intelligent and well-behaved, right?
For sure.
But Dr. Knoff really wants us to kind of look beyond that surface level, and that's what we're doing today. We're going to dig into his critique and see what we can learn.
Okay, so Dr. Knopf's main argument seems to be that these one-size-fits-all programs,
Yeah.
they often miss the mark. He thinks they rely on shaky research and maybe some overblown claims, and that schools should be focusing on goals that are more practical and things that you can really measure.
He actually uses this phrase, and I love this magical data,
Oh, interesting.
to describe how some programs will take any positive change and say, oh, that was us, that was our program,
Right.
even when other factors might be at play.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a good reminder that, just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other.
Correlation doesn't equal causation.
Exactly.
Okay, so where does all of this leave us with specific programs like PBIS? So positive behavioral interventions and supports.
Right.
I feel like that one especially has been a huge push in schools.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, in the past few years
Yeah.
especially.
Right. What's his take on that?
Well, so PBIS is a framework
Okay.
promoted by the U.S. Department of Education, and it's supposed to, create a more positive and supportive school climate.
Right.
But Dr. Knopf's concern is that it often gets implemented in this very superficial way.
Okay. What do you mean by superficial?
So he argues that schools often focus on the basic level interventions, like rewarding good behavior, and they neglect the students that have these more serious behavioral challenges,
Okay.
like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm.
I see.
Okay.
So
And he's not just concerned about the implementation either, right?
No.
He also says that these PBIS programs are really hard to sustain over time.
yeah.
It's like schools jump on the bandwagon for a few years, and then the next trendy thing comes along and everybody forgets about it.
And it's almost like they're trying to solve these giant societal issues,
Right.
but just within schools.
Yeah.
And without a strong enough foundation or commitment to really, stick with it and make that impact.
Okay, so then that brings us to SEL,
Yeah.
social emotional learning,
That's the big one.
which has become this huge buzzword in education.
Right.
Everybody's talking about it, but it feels like nobody can really define it.
That's exactly what Dr. Knopf is saying.
Right.
It's this really blurry concept.
There's all these different frameworks and definitions, and even the experts don't really agree on, a good explanation.
It reminds me of that article in Education Week
Oh, yeah.
where they were interviewing all these SEL experts,
Uh-huh.
and the answers just made things more confusing.
Right.
So, I mean, no wonder teachers are feeling overwhelmed. They're told SEL is important.
Yeah.
But how do you implement something when you don't know what it is?
Yeah, and that's a really good point.
Right.
And that leads into a big question Dr. Knoff asks.
Okay.
And that is, who benefits from all this confusion around SEL? He suggests we take a closer look at KESEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning.
KCL. Okay.
They're kind of the big players in the SEL world.
Right. They've developed their own framework, and they're really pushing for everybody to adopt it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Dr. Knoff points out that they also have a financial interest in the success of SEL.
Oh, how so?
They develop curriculum, they provide professional development. Oh, okay.
So it's worth considering whether that might influence, the research that they choose to put out there.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
So are you saying we should be cautious about, taking any study about SEL effectiveness at face value?
I think it's always good to, think critically about research.
Right.
Especially when, there could be some bias there.
Yeah.
And Dr. Knopf highlights that a lot of the research relies on correlational data.
Okay. So meaning just because SEL programs are linked to some positive outcomes doesn't mean the programs cause those outcomes.
Exactly. There could be tons of other factors.
Right.
Like better teaching, more parent involvement, or even just, random chance.
Right.
He also points out that a lot of the research comes from outside the U.S.
Oh, interesting.
So, how much can we really generalize those findings to our own system?
Okay, so it sounds like he's pretty skeptical of SEL.
He definitely has some concerns.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember he's not saying SEL is a bad idea in principle.
Okay.
He just wants schools to be more critical, more intentional,
Okay.
and more focused on, those tangible outcomes.
So is he offering an alternative?
He is.
He's not just, tearing down these programs.
Right.
He's actually suggesting a different path.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He's advocating for a much more focused approach, moving away from these big, vague frameworks and really honing in on teaching specific skills that students can actually use.
So like practical skills.
Yes.
Not just these abstract concepts.
Right. He actually has a whole list of these skills.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Things like listening attentively, following directions, using kind language.
Okay.
Really basic building blocks of communication, which you would be surprised how often those get overlooked.
I bet, yeah. And I imagine even those basic skills can make a huge difference for a student just in their overall experience.
Absolutely. And he doesn't stop there.
He also lists skills like asking for help, waiting your turn, joining an activity appropriately, even apologizing and accepting consequences. These are all things that kids have to do every day in school.
Right. It's like how to be a person.
Right, exactly. How to navigate all those social situations.
So it's really about equipping them to succeed.
Exactly.
And not just academically, but socially and emotionally.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to group skills,
okay.
which remember, PBIS is all about those positive interventions.
Right.
And a lot of that happens in groups.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes collaboration, problem solving, respecting diverse viewpoints.
Okay.
So things like listening to your peers with an open mind, contributing your fair share, taking turns, making sure everybody has a chance to participate.
That's huge.
Those are so important for group projects, classroom discussions, any kind of team activity.
And those are definitely skills that go way beyond just school.
Absolutely.
We're talking about preparing them for the future.
For jobs, for relationships, for everything.
For life, right?
Right, exactly. He even gets into the nuances of group dynamics.
Oh, wow, okay.
Like the difference between being a good leader and a good follower, reaching consensus, knowing when to agree, disagree, or just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Those are all these subtle but really important social skills.
It's not just a list of rules or behaviors. It's
Right.
about understanding, how people interact and how to work together.
Right.
So how do you teach that, though?
Well, that's what I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
The way he proposes teaching these skills.
Uh-huh.
Because remember how we talked about how Dr. Knoff criticizes SEL for being vague?
Right.
Well, he has this very structured, very science-backed, 5-step process for social skills instruction.
Okay.
It's very specific.
All ears, break it down for me.
So first you start with explicit teaching.
Okay.
You're breaking down each skill into these really clear, observable steps.
Okay, so instead of just saying be respectful,
Right.
you actually explain what does that look like.
Exactly. You outline the specific behaviors and language that you use to show respect in different situations.
I see.
No more fuzzy concepts. It's all about concrete actions.
It's like that old saying, show, don't tell.
Exactly.
But you can't show if you don't know what to show.
Right, exactly. And that leads us to the next step, which is modeling.
Okay.
So the teacher actually demonstrates the skill. They're providing a concrete example for the students to see.
So if we're talking about listening attentively, the teacher would model what it looks like to make eye contact.
Right.
Nod your head, ask questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that.
And then comes the really fun part, which is role-playing.
Oh, I love role-playing.
The students get to practice in a safe environment,
Yeah.
Using real-life scenarios that they might actually encounter at school.
It's like a little low-stakes rehearsal.
Exactly. They can try things out.
Yeah.
They can make mistakes.
Right.
They can get feedback without any serious consequences.
Safe space to experiment.
Exactly. And speaking of feedback, that's the next step.
Okay.
The teachers provide very specific, descriptive feedback.
Yeah.
They're focusing on what the student did well and how they can improve.
So like positive reinforcement and constructive criticism.
Exactly.
Not just focusing on the negative.
Right. And then the final step is what he calls transfer.
Okay.
Encouraging the students to actually use this skill in different situations throughout the whole school day.
So it's not just a one-time lesson.
Right.
You're really trying to make it part of the school culture.
That's the idea, and he's very clear that this 5-step process,
Yep.
it's not just something he came up with.
Right.
It's based on tons of research in social learning theory.
Okay.
This is a framework that's been proven to work.
So it's not just some feel-good activity.
Right.
It's an actual evidence-based approach.
Exactly.
Okay, but as we were saying earlier,
Yeah.
the curriculum is just one piece of the puzzle, right? He's also really adamant that even the best program won't work if the school environment doesn't support it.
Absolutely. He has a whole section where he outlines what's needed to create a school environment that really fosters social emotional learning.
That's interesting.
And that's what we're going to get into in the next part of this deep dive.
I can't wait.
It's fascinating stuff.
Okay, we'll be right back.
So we talked about how Dr. Knoff has these pretty big issues with SEL and PBIS.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate is he doesn't just criticize. He actually offers a really solid alternative.
Yeah, and he keeps mentioning this list of skills.
Right.
What are some examples from that list?
So he breaks them down into kind of two categories.
Okay.
You've got those individual skills
Yeah.
and then skills that you need for groups.
Okay.
On the individual side, he's talking about things like, listening attentively, following directions, using kind language.
Right.
Like really basic communication stuff.
The foundation.
Yeah, which you'd be surprised how often that gets overlooked.
Yeah, and I imagine even those like basic skills can make such a difference for a kid.
Oh, totally.
Just in their whole school experience.
It makes everything easier
Yeah.
if you can communicate effectively.
Totally.
And he doesn't stop there.
Okay.
He also lists skills like asking for help, waiting your turn, joining an activity appropriately, even apologizing and accepting consequences.
Right. It's like how to be a person.
Yeah, exactly how to navigate those social situations.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to group skills,
Okay.
which remember, PBIS is all about, positive behavioral intervention.
Right. A lot of that happens in groups.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So he really emphasizes collaboration, problem solving, respecting diverse viewpoints.
Okay.
Things like listening to your peers with an open mind, contributing your fair share, taking turns, making sure everybody participates.
Those are huge.
Yeah, they're so important for group projects, classroom discussions, any kind of teamwork.
And those are skills they'll use forever.
Absolutely.
Way beyond school.
Yeah. For jobs, for relationships, for everything.
Like life skills.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
He even gets into the nuances of group dynamics.
Oh, like what?
Like, the difference between being a good leader and a good follower, how to reach consensus.
Right.
When to agree, when to disagree, or just when to agree to disagree.
Respectful disagreement.
Right, exactly.
Right. That's a big one.
It's all these subtle but really important skills.
So it's not just a list of rules.
Right.
It's really about understanding, how do people interact.
It's about those dynamics and how to work together effectively.
So how do you teach all of that, though?
Well, this is what I think is really interesting, is the way he proposes teaching these skills. Yeah. Because, we talked about how he criticizes SEL for being so vague.
Right.
Well, he has this very structured, science-based 5-step process for social skills instruction.
Okay, I like it. Break it down for me.
Okay, so first you start with explicit teaching. You break each skill down into these really clear, observable steps.
Okay, so instead of just saying be respectful,
right,
you actually explain what that looks like.
Exactly. You outline the behaviors, you outline the language that you use to show respect in different situations.
No more fuzzy concepts.
Right. It's all about concrete actions.
I like it.
And then from there, we move on to modeling.
Okay.
The teacher actually shows the students what the skill looks like.
Right, so they have an example.
Exactly.
So if we were talking about listening attentively, the teacher would actually show the kids.
Yeah.
This is what it means to make eye contact, nod your head, ask questions.
Right.
Things like that.
Exactly. And then comes the really fun part, which is role-playing.
I love role-playing.
The students get to practice the skills in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Using, realistic scenarios that they might encounter at school.
So they're prepared.
Right. It's like a little low-stakes rehearsal.
Yeah.
They can try things out, make mistakes, get feedback. Right.
Without, any serious consequences.
Safe space to experiment.
Exactly. And speaking of feedback, that's the next step.
Okay.
Teachers provide very specific, very descriptive feedback. They focus on what the student did well and how they can improve.
So it's positive and constructive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the final step is what he calls transfer.
Okay.
It's about getting the kids to actually use this skill.
Right.
In different settings throughout the day.
Not just in the lesson.
Right. It's about making it part of their everyday life.
So you're really trying to shift the whole school culture.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And he's very clear that this 5-step process, it's not just something random.
Right.
It's based on a ton of research on social learning theory.
Okay.
It's a framework that's been proven to be effective.
So it's not just a feel-good activity.
Right.
This is real evidence-based stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, but we were talking earlier about how the curriculum is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's not enough. Right. He also talks about how even the best program won't work.
Right.
If the whole school environment doesn't support it.
If the culture's not there, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So how do you create that culture?
Well, he lays out some really key conditions for creating a school environment that really supports, social and emotional learning.
Interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We explored his criticisms of SEL and PBIS.
Yeah.
We talked about his alternative approach, with those specific skills and that 5-step process.
Right.
What really stands out to me is how much he focuses on those clear, measurable goals.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's saying, don't just do a program for the sake of doing it.
Right.
You have to know what you want to achieve and then track your progress.
It's all about intentionality.
Yeah, and it's so easy to get caught up in the latest trends.
Oh, total.
But we really need to step back and ask ourselves, is this actually working?
Yeah, are we seeing results?
Right, and for Dr. Knoff, that means, empowering students to navigate social situations, solve problems, manage their emotions in a healthy way.
It's not just about compliance.
Right.
It's about giving them the tools they need to actually thrive.
And what I appreciate is he's not just talking about theory.
Right.
He's offering a real concrete plan.
Yeah, he's got that 5-step process.
Exactly. And it's based on research and his own experience.
Decades of experience.
But, it's not just about the curriculum.
Right. The curriculum is just the starting point.
He also talks about the school environment.
Yeah, he says even the best program won't work if the school culture doesn't support it.
Yeah. So how do we create that supportive culture?
Well, he outlines some key conditions that are really important.
Give me an example.
So for one, he talks about fostering a sense of ownership among the staff.
Oh, so it can't just be another top-down mandate.
Exactly. The teachers, the administrators, they all need to be on board.
They have to buy in.
Right. They have to believe in it because if the adults don't believe it, the kids are going to pick up on that.
For sure. And I imagine that goes hand in hand with, providing training and support for the staff.
Oh, absolutely. Professional development is crucial.
Yeah. Teachers need the time to learn these strategies.
Right.
To practice, to get feedback.
It's not just going to happen overnight.
Right.
And he also emphasizes that it can't just be limited to the classroom.
Okay.
You need to extend that social emotional learning into other areas of the school.
Like the cafeteria, the playground.
Exactly. The hallways everywhere.
That's interesting.
It's about creating a consistent message.
Yeah, like this is who we are.
Right. These are our values.
This is how we interact.
It's about embedding it into the whole culture.
Not just a one-off program.
Exactly.
I hadn't thought about it that way before.
It's really about a shift in mindset.
And he also talks about relationships, right?
Yeah, strong relationships between students and adults are so important.
It makes sense. I mean, it's hard to learn and grow if you don't feel safe and connected.
Exactly. And it's not just about the kids feeling connected to the adult.
Right. The adults have to model those skills too.
It starts with us.
Creating that culture of respect and empathy.
Exactly. Leading by example.
This has been such a good deep dive.
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of SEL and PBIS now.
Me too.
And I love how he focuses on those practical skills.
Yeah, and creating that supportive environment.
So what do you think this all means for our listeners?
That's a great question.
Whether they're a parent, a teacher, or just someone who cares about education.
I think the big takeaway is to be aware of the limitations of these programs.
Right.
And to be critical of the research that's out there.
It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of the next big thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But we have to keep asking ourselves those tough questions.
Is this actually working?
How do we know?
What's the evidence?
And I think Dr. Knoff's alternative approach offers a really valuable perspective.
Yeah, it's about focusing on those specific skills, providing individualized support,
Right.
and empowering students to take ownership of their learning.
I love that.
It's about creating a school environment where every student feels safe, supported, and equipped to succeed.
That's a great goal.
It's a vision worth striving for.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Okay? I like it.
Given everything we've learned, what steps can you take to advocate for effective social-emotional learning and support in your community?
Yeah. What can you do to make a difference?
Maybe it's talking to your kid's teacher. Maybe it's volunteering at a school.
Or even just staying informed.
Yeah. reading the research.
Educating yourself.
Because every voice matters.
Absolutely.
And by understanding these different approaches, we can work together to create a system that really supports all students.
That's the goal.
Okay, so keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for positive change.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.